Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and as always told, Out of Voice Radio. So today, I am showing you a lovely new supporter card. It is Kahili. It was revealed and translated by the lovely David Hochmann over on Facebook at RappelmannTCG. And it is a very, very unique supporter. It really isn't one that we've seen much of. It's certainly not one that springs to mind. Usually, I can draw parallels. Not so easy in this video. Although, as always, if you do think of a parallel I should have drawn but haven't, well, there's a mighty good job. There's a comment section down below. It is a new supporter card, and it reads, draw 2 cards, flip a coin. If heads, don't discard this card. Put it in your hand instead. So it's a supporter card that stays in your hand. That's weird, ladies and gentlemen. Now, it only stays in a coin flip. So if you flip a tails, it goes to the discard anyway. But it basically means you can just keep this for next turn, and the turn after, and the turn after. We've all had those games where we just cannot draw another supporter, where we play one supporter and can't draw another one for the rest of the game. Well, great news, ladies and gentlemen. Kahili's actually got your back here. It's another supporter. It keeps coming back around. The problem is, it draws 2 cards. That's all it does. It draws 2 cards. And the problem is, right, at the moment, we've got How. How draws us 3 cards. So this is just a worse How, but you can flip a coin. So let's do some maths here quickly. Let's assume, for argument's sake, you play 4 of these in your deck, and I know you often won't, but just for the maths of it. And let's assume you hit exactly 50%, which you on average should. You essentially use 2 of them twice, netting you 4 cards each, or 8 cards in total. And you use 2 of them once, netting you 2 cards each, 4 cards in total, which gives you 12 cards, or an average of 3 cards per Kahili. Or to put it another way, if you hit 50% on your coin flips, you should expect to average about 3 cards per Kahili. But remember, when I say 3 cards per Kahili, you're never actually getting 3 cards from this. You're only ever getting 2 at a time. It's just that about half the time, you can reuse it and get another 2 cards the next turn. So as a pure draw supporter, it is just objectively worse than How. How is that a good thing? And if you want me to stop making these How puns every time I mention How in a video, how well do you think that's going to work? How do you think that's in my nature? How would you like it if I just never made silly jokes again? You'd probably like it quite nicely. So dumb puns aside then, this doesn't look great as a draw card, and it actually gets worse, right? Because if you think about something like an Octillery, generally speaking, Octillery will draw until you've got 5 cards in hand, ergo, you want the fewest cards in hand possible in order to make good use of Octillery. So, ironically enough, right, not only will this only draw you 2 cards per turn, but it will actually mean that you draw 1 fewer card with Octillery than you would otherwise. Same thing goes for Oranguru here. So you're actually potentially building up to badness. Want some more examples? I've got more. How about something like a Miss Magius here that's got Poltergeist? Or if you want a more recent example, Trevenant has Poltergeist. And the amazing thing here is that if you flip a heads, you've got an extra supporter in your hand, which means Poltergeist will do an extra 30 damage. My point here is that on the one hand, it's quite nice to guarantee that you've got a supporter ready for next turn. On the other hand, there are multiple times when having extra supporter cards in your hand is actually a bad thing. One more example, I could keep going, but let's just give you one more. Chandelure from Steam Siege, which is admittedly rotating, which has the lovely attack past friends, 10 damage plus 10 more for each supporter card in your discard pile. Flipping ahead keeps it in your hand and actually means you do 10 damage less. So, generally speaking here, why would we ever want to play this card? I've just spent the past kind of 4 minutes telling you how it's not as good a draw card as How, And there are many, many times when actually keeping it in your hand will be a bad thing rather than a good thing. Let me play devil's advocate here. It's one card in your deck. And sometimes you don't want to play many supporters. Let's say, for argument's sake, you're playing something like a Quad Zoroark deck. Well, Quad Zoroark has got its own draw power here. It is going to be drawing 2 cards per Zoroark per turn with trade. So maybe here, you just play a bunch of Kahili, and then if you can hit heads, then you've got a supporter card ready for next turn, and okay, you're only playing this to get 2 cards per turn, but you are using fewer spaces in your deck to do so. And if you're looking for a positive, if you're looking for a reason to play this, and I admit it's slightly difficult to do so, the reason is this. It's fewer spaces in your deck, and you essentially build a deck whereby you can reuse this. So instead of playing 8 draw supporters, you're playing 6, or instead of playing 9, you're playing 7, or whatever. But if you're doing that, you're going to have to be relying on draw like Zoroark, etc. Because even a draw card like Octillery, like I previously said, isn't going to work, because it depends on how many cards you've got in your hand. It needs to be something that just plain draws here. Because honestly, there's enough cards that punish you for keeping stuff in your hand, both that you play and your opponent plays, and drawing 2 cards is flat out abysmal. I love the mechanic here. And if this was draw 3 cards, flip a coin if heads, keep it in your hand, I could see an argument. Well, it would be better than how most of the time, depending on the deck. Obviously, stuff like Octillery, you'd still want to play how. But even then, I'm sitting here comparing it to how. How's not a good card? How's the kind of card that new players play because it's a nice cheap supporter, it's given out in all the theme decks, and they can get hold of them very easily, and it's a nice starting supporter. And then you get hold of stuff like Cynthia and you're like, oh, wait a second, now I don't have to play this card anymore. And as I've said in a few videos lately, we used to be desperate for draw cards. We were looking at a rotation with Cynthia, and then Judge, but that doesn't draw you enough extra cards, and then Copycat. But your opponent with Copycat can always just pass with a single card hand, that being a Cynthia or something like that, and then you can't use Copycat. And we were struggling. But now we're getting Tate and Liza, which is basically a Shauna. Oh look, now we've got a better draw card. And we're getting Tourist, which allows you to draw until you got 5 cards in hand after having discarded as many cards from you like as your hand, which is a really good draw card. And another one which would not combo very nicely here with Kahili. And just yesterday I told you about the new Manectric with the redonkulous ability that says you can discard your hand and draw a new 4 cards, and you probably see where we're going with this at this stage. It's not useful. If we were desperate for supporters, maybe I could see playing this, but I don't think we're that desperate. And it's worse than how. And I adore this mechanic that you can keep it in your hand. I want this mechanic. But I want it on a good card. How about an Ace-Spec Cynthia, where you flip a coin if heads, you get to keep it for the next turn? How about draw 4 cards and flip a coin if heads, keep it for the next turn? Something that's really going to excite us. At the moment, my excitement level is extremely low for this card. Now, before we finish, I do need to give a shout out to Art of Pokemon TCG on Twitter, who sent out this wonderful tweet saying that essentially Kahili is one half of a complete picture, like the old legend cards, because it combos nicely with the EX Delta species Holland's Electrode. I adore this. It fits so perfectly. It's now my favourite thing about Kahili. This is not a good supporter card. It's an interesting one. It's very much worth having a discussion about, and I want to talk about it, and I want to discuss it with you guys, and I do obviously want to hear your thoughts in the comments, but it's not a good card. It's worth doing a video because it's a fun discussion. It's a very unique card, but it's not a good card. Don't play this card. I'm giving it, like, I don't know, 2 wassies. Even that seems overly generous, to be honest. But tell me what you think in the comment section. Go nuts, be nice. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at Wassie, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all of that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do just that. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.